Okay. Where's that?
And go to the bottom. Save changes.
Okay.
Hey, we're here.
We're here. Sorry we're late, everybody.
Sorry we're running late. Having some technical difficulty.
It was about time because this has really gone without a hitch.
It's been quite flawless.
Yeah. We were really due for one. Oh, you know what? I'm not recording yet on in Pro Tools, so let's do that.
Okay.
And
why don't you hit the tunes, Maestro?
Well, should I wait until Steve gets in?
Sure. Yeah, he'd like the tunes.
Let's wait until Steve gets in.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Sorry we're late, folks.
Do you want to just close that one down now that we're recording?
I just kind of want to make sure. I'll try and make it smaller here, but I just want to make sure that once Steve gets in, we're properly recording his audio.
For those of you who don't know, it's Saturday, and we are the Brothers Landreth. We are hanging out on our weekly internet hang. We call it Karate in the Garage, and we got off to a bit of a rocky start, which I think we've been doing this for a couple months now. More than that, maybe 3 months.
Yeah, and we haven't had any issues until now.
Yet, so it was bound to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're a little late, but we're here, and we're really glad that you've joined us. We're going to wait until Steve gets sort of logged in before we hit our. I'll get a little closer to this thing here.
You're too casual, baby. You're too casual.
I'm in on it. We've been really excited about doing this one. We have a dear friend of ours joining us for a conversation, our friend Steve Bell. And maybe I'll wait till Steve gets in here and then I'll intro him. But
yeah, and we'll wait to roll the Karate in the Garage
anticipation
audio.
We're our own countdown.
You know what? We might have to change the name.
Yeah. Well, there's a podcast called Karate in the Garage.
Spoiler alert: Dave and I are probably going to turn this into a podcast. And a friend of mine went looking and said, "Yeah, I found your podcast, and the artwork was really weird, but the description was right." And then I clicked on it, and it was not you guys. It was like industry professionals talking about behind the scenes things. I was like, okay, that's a little heavy handed. I don't think we talk about ourselves that way, but turns out it was a couple of different guys.
Huh. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to check it out, but I'm sure they're great. I'm sure it's a wonderful show. I don't actually listen to podcasts.
You're not living, bro. You're barely living.
It's not my thing. I can't multitask very well, and if I hear people speaking in the background, I can't do anything else.
Hey, looks like we've got Mr. Bell in the house. We are going to bring Steve in on the action. Steven.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey,
what a miracle! All right.
Well, Steve. It's not that much of a miracle. My computer, when I fired it up again, I couldn't get the camera on. So we're back to we'll record this from this end, and as long as you can hear me now, we're good.
Okay.
Amazing. Well, we're live. We're gonna roll
our theme song.
We're gonna roll our theme song, and we're gonna do our thing. So, what's the date today?
March 6th.
March 6th.
Stardate 2030.
All right,
folks, friends,
Milky Way galaxy,
dearly beloved. Welcome to Karate in the Garage with Joe and Dave from the Brothers Landreth,
and a very special guest.
Today's a very special day because we have Steve Bell in the house, very near and dear to us. And
nice shirt, Steve.
Look at that.
He came packing.
He paid full price for that, right?
Actually, I actually owe you for it. I picked it up before Christmas, and I promised David I'd get him a check, and I realized this morning I haven't done it yet. So
your money's no good here.
Your money's no good here, Steve.
We'll talk about why. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I quickly want to intro you to our friend Steve. So Steve is a very important character in our lives, and we'll get into that. But Steve, you have an incredibly impressive resume. You are a storyteller, a songwriter, a performer, an advocate, an author, a parent, a grandparent.
Yeah.
You are a 3-time Juno winner. You are a 4-time WCMA winner, a whole pile of other trophies and hardware that you've picked up, including Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012.
Holy mackerel.
You've put out 20 solo records starting in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's incredible what you've done, the breadth of your career, the longevity of your career. And part of why we wanted to bring you on is because you've had such an impact on us as people, but especially as artists and especially as sort of entrepreneurs and business owners.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I
Um,
got to say, watching what you guys do, and just like Winnipeg and us are so proud of you, and just to, if we've been a part of what you guys are doing in any way, shape, or form, we're kind of thrilled.
oh my goodness, massively,
Good.
massively. Um, but I mean, like, so this show is very casual. It's kind of a hang, and then we
Okay.
also take some questions from the audience. But
Yeah.
for this first little bit, I thought maybe we get into the history and you and Joe, because you and Joey connected first. I got to know you a little bit
Yep.
later once you guys have been pals and working together. So why don't you guys sort of fill us in? Like, how did you guys end up working together, playing together?
Well, I've known about Steve since I was probably about, I think the first time I saw you play was at the meeting place.
I was
And
wondering if that was the connection, right?
Yeah, and I was probably 16 or 17,
Yeah.
maybe even younger.
You would have
And
been
then
playing in Johnny Buller's band at that point, no? Or
that was actually before I joined John's band, but that was when
okay.
I met you for the first time.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
was because you were a mentor to John, who was my first sort of mentor, like in the professional capacity,
And your first gig.
and my first kind of professional gig, where it's like,
Right.
you have to learn all the parts from the record, and you can't show up dressed like a slob, and like a lot of those
Clean
rules.
your fingernails. Yeah.
Clean your fingernails. Yeah, exactly. He hired me and Meg Dolovich and Ryan Voth when Meg and I were 15 to play in his band, and that was our first traveling gig was with John. And so it was like, every now and then we would miss school on a Friday or a Monday, but it was okay as long as we were caught up on our homework, kind of thing. So it was pretty cool time. But that's when you first came sort of you first sort of came onto my radar was through John, and he always talked about how you were a mentor to him. And then I think fast forward a handful of years when we all turned 18, because that's the legal age in Manitoba, we started playing in a band with all of the people from John's band minus John.
That's right. Yeah.
And also Alexa Dirks, who's been on the show.
Yeah.
Also known as Begonia, was the lead singer. And you're good pals with Alexa's parents.
Yeah.
Right.
We've known them for years. She, in fact, her dad he's an artist. He also curates an art museum in Winnipeg. And so I've known him, and we've worked together on various projects over the years. So yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of how we connected. And then fast forward another handful of years from there, you had called Meg and I to play on a CBC session that you were doing, and the band was me and Meg and Coco Dugas.
Yeah, but before that, what happened though, just to fill in a little bit, was I had met you, but I was also hearing about this band. Was it Little Boy Boom? Is that what you're called?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And my kids were telling me about this band. Everywhere I went, I kept on hearing about Little Boy Boom. And so I finally came to see the band play. It was in the West End there somewhere. And I
on Sherbrooke.
Yeah. And then I walked in and went, oh, that's because everyone's talking about this hotshot guitar player. So as soon as I saw you, I went, oh, that guy. And then I looked over the room, and your dad, who I know from my bar years 35 years ago, was across the room, and he sees me, and I kind of gestured towards the band, kind of going, "Great band." He goes, "That's my boy." So, I went, wow.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so that's there the connection was made. So then I not only knew that you were that guy, but also that I had some kind of a connection through my own history through Wally.
Right. And so just so everybody knows, when I was playing in Steve's band, that's how he introduced me every night, by telling that story.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. It was very, very, very fun. But yeah, so then, I mean, after that CBC session, I came, you brought me in to do some playing on a record, and then I played on a handful of records.
Which album was that? Was the first one?
I think
Keening for the Dawn,
yeah,
was the first
album.
one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
so you and Murray and Jill Fournier and Daniel Roy sort of formed the band of that album.
Yep. And then we toured it, and then I played and sang on a couple of other sort of things, and then you and I and Murray did the Steve Bell Trio. Yeah. Which was so fun.
That was a really fun time. And what I remember the most about that was the vocals, actually. Like,
me too.
Yeah, when you think about three guitar players, it must have been a guitar thing, but it wasn't. It actually was more of a vocal thing. It was lovely. That was a really fun tour.
That was one of my favorite things that I've been able to be a part of, and still would love to do it again. We should gotta get the band back together,
Gotta
man.
get the.
Well,
All of my people call your people.
so from my perspective too, I remember that really made an imprint on you, because when we were learning to sing as the bros, so we spent a lot of time working on our vocals, a lot of time working on harmonies, and you kept referring to those gigs and that sort of string of tour dates, and that band is like, this is my golden standard for singing, and when we sing in this band, this is the kind of things that me and Murray do. This is the way we blend, this is the way we approach these harmonies. So that really informed the way we sang live.
The other thing,
That's cool.
The other thing was how because I'd always been in situations where you more or less improvise your parts, you know, and like you settle into a groove after you play a song 15 times and go, okay, the bass player tends to go up, so I'll go down, and you start to develop these things. But in your band, it was, once we settled into a part, it was like, no, don't change. And it was like, it was just a different way, but it was, I kind of watching you keep track of what everybody was singing. And then because you have such a history in singing groups as well. Like you did tons of session singing for jingles and commercials. And so you had this sort of like experience or education, like in a much more organized way. That was something that wasn't how I approached stuff like that. And so I learned a lot from you about knowing exactly what you want to hear and making and holding people to account and going like, no, yeah, you know, we came up with this part yesterday, you got to sing the same thing, what you sang yesterday you also have to sing today, you know. And was like, oh I get it. You know. And then I brought that very much forward into our band, and much to the guys' frustration, I'm sure.
But you know what? It's funny. Like so part of that is sort of a way I approach music. But part of the reason why I approach music that way is because of my limited skill. So when, you know, like, I'm not putting myself down, but like, I could never be in a band that does tons of improv, because I can't. If you go somewhere that is unfamiliar to me, I can't go with you. I'm the kind. I write a song, I learn my part, I practice it, I do it. That's kind of, and I've got a little bit of wiggle room, right? But I don't have a ton, because I just don't have those chops, right?
Yeah, right.
So, you know, we're getting down the musical rabbit hole, but I want to backtrack a pinch if I can.
Sure.
Because last week we were talking about mentors, which was like sort of our preamble into this conversation. And I wanted to sort of come back to that a little bit, because we were musing on this yesterday. We were talking about all these people that have had these really huge impacts. And I mean, it, you know, musically is the obvious one, but that's actually probably the least important of the ways that you've sort of had an impact on us. You know, something that comes up regularly when we're dealing with like ethical situations in the band. How do we handle this situation? How do we handle this dispute, this conflict? Like, we look at each other and go, okay, what would Steve do?
What would Steve and Dave do?
Yeah. Steve. And just so you know,
That's awesome.
You can't see him because he's hiding somewhere around the corner, but Dave Zaglinski is Steve's business manager and business partner.
Yeah.
And you guys have formed this thing. And you know, actually, one of the first things that you guys did when we first started the band, you guys came to us, and you said, okay, we want to sit you down and talk to you about what we've done. And you gave us this insight into your business model, which we didn't immediately adopt, but here we are almost 10 years later, and boy, is what we're doing looking very similar to what you guys did with Signpost. Yeah. And it's not an accident, you know, that was very deliberate. So, you know, for us at that moment, like when we started the band, it was a whirlwind of like songs, new band, touring, I don't know, a Juno, what's going on, record deals. And you guys sort of swooped in and gave us some guidance, and we'll talk about, maybe we'll get into some of the other things that you guys did for us. But you know, at the time we didn't think about it, but now I'm looking back on it and wondering, like, how deliberate is that kind of mentorship when you guys see somebody in your community and you sort of go, I think I might be able to offer some insight. Like, is that just part of who you are? Or is that something that you're kind of like, is that a bit of a mandate for what you do?
It's a little bit of both. I think like whenever I see someone young or struggling, and I sort of feel that that I might have something to offer, not by way of controlling. I've never wanted to manage or own other people's music, like that part of. I'm just not even interested in that. But the thing is when I was growing up as a boy, as a teenager, there was a couple of mentors in my life that literally made the difference of everything. And it wasn't just mentors that came and swooped in and gave advice. It's mentors that came in and gave resources, people that helped me fund things. So it wasn't just, hey, young fellow, I'm smarter than you. I've lived longer than you. I've got some advice for you. It was, I have that, but here's some money because you're going to need it. Like, and so those two things, the gift of wisdom and the gift of resources were always linked for me. And I've always felt, because it was so profound growing up in my life, it happened so much. I always sort of thought I need to be ready to pass on that when it's my turn. And I think when Dave and I, we have this little business called Signpost Music, and we're just a little indie record company that basically just does Steve Bell music. But when we started to have a little bit of success, and what I mean by success isn't that we've ever sold a ton of records, but what I mean by success a little bit is this, there's a little bit extra money in the bank at the end of the month, and, you can do a couple of things. You can, distribute it, for each other. But every once in a while say, hey, you know what? Those guys are doing really good work. And I think if they had a little bit of a kick, a boost, it might make all the difference. And
Yeah.
there's real, I guess it sounds generous or something. There's real joy in doing it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just like, oh shit, we should help somebody else. There's real joy in it. And I get to watch you guys, and I know in some way, I kind of helped this happen.
Absolutely.
And I'll stumble on you guys. You're in tour in Europe, or this is going on, or you get an award or whatever. Kind of like, yeah, we were part of that. And so it's not just being generous or open-handed. It's a good kind of a selfishness. I just kind of want to be part of good things, and some of those are my things, and some of those are your things. And so if you let me in on it, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I took a lot of that from you, like being on the road and watching you interact with people, and also the way that you presented your music on stage. There was a very there is a genuineness and an openness to it that, like, I think we've been talking about mentorship the last week, and now here we are doing it again. But I think it also, there's this, like, I learned a lot. Oh man, I learned so much working with you over the years. But one of my favorite things was listening to you not just tell stories, because you're a beautiful storyteller and it's always so moving. But I got such a kick out of watching how you addressed an audience. And I learned a lot from that. Like, as I was trying to figure out who my persona was as a front person on stage, was like, how do I want to present myself? Because I've seen people do it really well, and I've seen people do it really poorly, and I'm kind of trying to figure out my own sort of identity. And the thing that I thought was incredibly interesting was you never changed. Like, I would watch so many, my dad is also a great performer, and I watch him go on stage, and he becomes this, like, he becomes this kind of character, and which is very much himself, but it's a different version of him. And I watched, like, some of my favorite rock stars who just, like, sunglasses go on and they become this, and it's like this larger than life character. You don't change. You're the same guy. And I remember sitting, I can't remember where we were playing, but it was a big show. I want to say there was probably like 1,000 people. It was one of the bigger ones. Maybe it was like the Windspear in Edmonton or something.
Yeah.
And you got out on stage and you started launching into the story. And I remember thinking, like, okay, this story totally works in an intimate setting. I wonder how this is going to go over. And you start to talk about whatever it was you're talking about. And then you look at the crowd and you go, you know what I mean? And it was like, he just asked 1,000 people, like,
Yeah.
And it was like, you might as well be sitting across the table one-on-one with this guy and having a conversation, but you were having this really intimate conversation with an entire room of people. And I thought, I want to model myself after that. I want, like, I mean, there's nothing that I would love more than to be that guy who can wear sunglasses inside and not give a shit about anything and just kind of like, like I've watched one of my absolute guitar heroes get on an airplane one time, and I was like, that dude is bad. He's a bad man, and I will never be that guy.
He looks as cool getting on a plane as he does playing
He
guitar.
looks
solos
just
at the
as
front of the
cool
stage.
sitting at the front of the airplane than he does playing. And I knew in that moment that's not me.
Right.
But watching you play was like, this is how I want my shows to feel. Is I want to feel I want it to feel like a collaboration. And I think that's what you do, like, and talking about exactly what you were saying about just wanting to take part and wanting to create this community. That's how you feel at a Steve Bell show too, and that's how I felt being in your band as well as being in the audience at a Steve Bell show. You know what I mean? And it's a really beautiful thing. It's collaborative.
You know what? If like you know my skill set as a musician, and I'm not an improviser, and I can't do that. So I watch, when I've seen guys play and either a jazz combo or where that kind of spontaneous interaction is happening, it's so wonderful. And I've always lamented that I didn't either have that skill naturally or just don't have the discipline. But that happens between me and the audience.
100%.
Like there's a sense where the jazz in my concerts is between me and the audience. It's not a musical. Yeah. It's not a musical jazz. So you walk on stage, and you get that look from that person, and you respond to that. They just throw you a lick.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's,
man, I can't tell you like how, because anybody who hasn't been to a Steve Bell show, sorry to interrupt you, but what you're saying is just firing me up, because I would watch, whether it was in the trio, I'm sitting on your left, or it was the band when I was sitting on your right, I would watch the show progress. And there were pieces that you would there's touchstones everywhere. Like you would, this song has this story, this song has this story. And sometimes they would be verbatim. Like it would just, and you start to, but then one night you would elaborate on one detail. And all of a sudden, as a guy who had just played the last 15 shows with you, I knew this story really well. All of a sudden now I'm being sucked further into your story, and there is this incredible sense of improvisation. And then some nights you would take a complete left turn and tell a story I had never, ever heard in my life. And I love that. Like that's your jazz. Like the way that you put on a show is incredibly collaborative. I keep coming back to that word. And that to me is like great improvisation musically is when everybody is collaborating around one central theme, which is make music together.
Yeah. And you got to remember that in a live show, in the best sense of the word, the audience is in the band. Actually, it's not a metaphor. It's actually true.
Can you say that again? I feel like I want to highlight that.
For a live show, the audience is in the band. And you're okay, there's different forms of art. There's I'm sitting at home and I'm writing a song. That's an art form. And then I perform the song. That's an art form. But a concert itself is art in real time, and you've got it is collaborative art in real time. And the audience really doesn't realize this. But I think why audiences love a good show so much is because they're invited into the art process. They're a comment or a look or the band is actually responding to the audience, and they're changing even just imperceptibly their dynamics, their the whole mood or groove of the thing. And at the end of the night, all these songs and stories, and then these little jazz moments between you and the band members, and jazz moments between you and the audience, they form this painting. And at the end, we all go, "We're awesome." Right, like, and the key word there is we. Where everybody sort of felt like they were part of that process, and those of us that do this professionally, we know how wonderful it feels to have created something good. And so when you let the audience be part of the creation of something good, that's a good feeling for them. And
totally.
And they tend to feel warmly towards you for it.
So Steve, I don't know if you can see the comments, but there's there are comments coming in.
If you click on it there.
Okay. So we've got Bem Evans who's throwing some shade at you right now, saying it's a collaborate. And this is actually something this is something that I want to. I also want to talk about. It's a collaboration for Steve because the audience has to fill him in on the lyrics when he forgets them.
Oh, does that ever sound familiar? If anybody's been to a Brothers Landreth show, you realize that you're actually on the hook for singing half the songs.
So
just
okay,
before
hang
you go
on.
That's my cousin, by the way.
Oh, okay, Bam, you're in trouble at the next family gathering as soon as COVID-19 is over.
Yeah.
And that was also something that I learned from you, Steve. So I like the very first time that I screwed up lyrics on stage, I panicked, and I think I just started to try to make up lyrics, which was something that I did and sometimes still do, but it was something that I did, and I thought for whatever reason that nobody could tell until somebody was like, "Are you just making that shit up?" Sometimes and they're like, yes. And so I would get this incredible anxiety whenever that happened, whenever I forgot a lyric or I messed up a lyric.
Yeah.
And that was something that playing in your band and watching you have that moment of vulnerability where you blank and you're like, and I remember the first time it happened being like, what's he gonna do? Because I'm just getting to know you as a band leader, and you let the wall down and you're like, oh. So you said something about old age, and instead of it being this awkward, uncomfortable moment, it became this moment of absolute levity. And it was like, there is that invisible wall between the band and the audience. And when you can bring that down, that's when everybody has a magical time, performer and audience. And for me, that was this teachable moment where like, oh, that's not something to run away from. That's something to absolutely run toward. And and that's something that it happens to me all the time. I forget lyrics all the time, and my audience now knows that they have to be on the ready, because I'll go, help me out, and then somebody will go, you didn't call it right. Thanks. Thank you.
That happens to me all the time. But if you think about it, is that part of the best art? There should be a trace of humanity in it. Well, it should be a lot more a trace of humanity. And I remember going to see. I don't want to put down a guy like John Mayer. He's so wonderful. But I remember going to see a concert of his, and I was so excited because I'm such a fan, and I love his songs, I love his singing, I love his playing, and I knew that he was going to have an amazing band. And we get to the show, and I spent all this money, and I had great seats, and it was perfection. It was absolute perfection. And I've never been so disappointed in a concert in my life. There was no humanity. He didn't tell us any stories, and he didn't let us into his life. There was no cracks anywhere where he or we were vulnerable. It was, and I'm again. He's very, very good. I'm a fan. I don't mean to be critical.
So are we.
Yeah, I know. So I feel stupid, criticizing him. But it was more. But I do remember at the end going away, thinking I don't know that guy any more than when I came in.
Yeah.
He gave us nothing of who he is, and including flaws or whatever. And whenever I've come away from concerts that I've just adored. It's really, in the end, it's not the perfection of the music or the thing. It's that shared humanity. Begonia, Alexa, she's unbelievable, right? So she comes out, she's got this. I mean, her shows are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But she's so ridiculously human. And she's very cheeky about that, and she's hilarious about it. And you're just delighted when you come away from that concert. You love her. You don't just love her music. You just like, I wish I lived next to that person, right?
Yeah, and her stories bring you in, but also the way that she just is.
Yeah.
It just and it's not like she does have this persona, but the thing is that like her persona is her. Like she is that person also.
So her persona doesn't cover up her humanity.
No, that's
any more than my guitar covers up mine.
Yeah,
right?
And that's a word that's a word I have been thinking about so much lately. I've been doing a lot of work sort of on my mental health over the last couple of years, and seeing a psychologist and talking a lot about our experiences and how we perceive ourselves and why we do the things that we do. And, you know, for me, I just have this like really obsessive streak that is on one hand really good for productivity, but not so good for balance. And
Right.
so just trying to understand these things, and the thing that I'm really like, I'm really focusing in on is this idea of humanity and what is my humanity. Because if I only sit around working on my craft, I'm not participating in my own humanity. I'm only sharpening a tool. And
Right.
at some point it feels like, okay, well, at the end of the line, you got a quiver full of sharp arrows, but you've experienced no life. Then what's the point? So
Yeah.
I think in art there is this really incredible phenomenon, and I think the thing is like I've kind of had it all wrong a large part of my career thus far, because it's about, for me, like this endless pursuit of um trying to be exceptional at the things that I do, and
Yeah.
the thing that I've missed out on is that the thing that makes music this beautiful thing to share with people is that you're sharing your humanity.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
showing yourself, you're vulnerable emotionally, you're telling stories, you're letting people in. And and that's something that's another what was Sonia calling it, a toward move, something like that. And that's something that I've been really trying to bring in to the whole thing a little bit more. And I don't think that I haven't done any of that, but I haven't been focused on it as much. And so
But
this idea of like creativity and all that stuff just being like just an exercise in showing my humanity more than just like I want to write a cool sounding song, or I don't know, whatever.
Well, the thing is to integrate it. I mean, I think when you're younger, you sort of think, I want to, for me, I mean, I never wanted to be a great guitar player. I've always wanted to write great songs. So I learned to play guitar so I could write songs. That was the thing. So, but it's effort. It's a lot of work. And if my goal is to just always write great songs, and that's really the only goal, then pretty much everybody that calls me, everybody that demands anything of me is an obstacle. They're taking my time. I got more important things to do. I become an agitated person. I become a lonely person. And I might become a great writer, but in the end, you start to realize, no, it's the commitments that I make to people that put me into situations of vulnerability and stress and sadness and anger and reconciliation that make for good songs. And so the life I lead, and the commitments that I've made to my wife, and you guys both know my wife, I adore my wife. But to be kind of cruel about relationships. Relationships are what's the word I'm looking for? They're costly. They take time, they take effort. So I can say I need to sort of go home and be a husband so that tomorrow I can spend time writing songs, because that's what I really
Yeah.
want to do. Is a real error. And in the same way that the audience is in the band, all my commitments are in the songs and in the band too. And all the things that they call me to do, as inconvenient as they are, practice of my work, but that's actually they're the songs, those things are in the band too. My kids are in my band, my wife is in my band, my neighbor is in my band, because all of that stuff gets integrated, hopefully, into the art that kind of goes out there, right? And so you do realize that when you walk on stage, maybe this is an older person's understanding, but that I carry onto the stage my whole life with me, and that's also in the show, and gets to have a voice and gets to have a solo spot, or gets to do a riff here and there. That's all part of it. This coming week, next Thursday is March 11th, and that was my last concert last year. And I performed it at Drumheller Prison in Alberta. That was my last concert. And
Cool.
I learned to play guitar in Drumheller Prison when I was a little boy.
Yeah.
And I know every time I walk on stage and I play my instrument and I can see people being moved, or delighted, or whatever it is they're getting out of it, I know that I'm carrying those guys onto stage and they're part of that show. I'm so aware of it all the time, right? So it's, so then you can start to celebrate all of your life. You're going to be a dad soon. that's going to interfere with your time. I'm just telling you. I promise you, you're going to love that kid. And there's great reward and stuff, but it's gonna make things more difficult in some
Yeah.
way. But
I
rather
can
than
corroborate this statement.
yeah, I know you can. But rather than treat it and all other obligations in your life, parents and brothers, and rather than treat them as sort of separate things that have a separate theater in which they exist, that you kind of have to do. Get them on stage, put them in the band, put that whole thing in the band. Every time you're dealing with a child or changing a diaper, this is part of your work. And and if you do it with love, right? If you do those things not out of a sense of bleak duty and obligation, but say, no, this is part of making beauty. And the greatest beauty is the most profoundly integrated beauty. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Oh, perfectly.
Yeah.
okay.
And I can see, I'm watching the comments, but I know you're like, this is not only resonating with these two goofballs here, but
everybody watching. Yeah.
You're speaking, and I want to take maybe a slight macro look at it for a sec, because we're talking about music, but all these ideas are relevant everywhere in your life. When you bring honesty and truth to whatever it is that you're doing, you create a space of vulnerability where people can slip in and connect to their shared humanity. And now you have now you have connection, which is, what have we learned this year of isolation and quarantine? Is what is the most important thing that we all have? It's each other.
Yeah.
What is everybody missing? What is everybody struggling with right now through this? It's that we're disconnected. How do we connect? We connect when we leave space for each other to be real and honest. And when you go to a show that's perfect and there's no flaw, there's nowhere for you to insert yourself. There's nowhere for you to connect because there's nothing to relate to.
Right.
We don't relate to perfection.
Right.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
No.
I relate to brokenness. I relate to sadness. I relate to depression and struggle and anxiety. And like, who out there doesn't? Who else doesn't go?
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah.
It's like to be tired.
And joy too, but joy is not. But joy is not perfection. Happiness is not perfection. Is something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even okay, guys. You guys know I'm a Christian, and so I come from there's a religious commitment. There's a metaphysical commitment in my music. But if I dump that on my audience and don't respect them for who they are, which might be quite different, it's just an alienating process. And now I'm an oppressor, but if I say, this is my thing, I'll tell you a story. It's a great story. Years ago, there's a woman who came out to my concerts on a regular basis. And I actually saw her about a year ago, near the end of the last concerts. And she's an atheist woman. And I knew that. I don't know why I know that, but she comes to my concerts all the time. Always wants to talk to me afterwards.
It's like, hey, lady.
Yeah. And so she came up to me one time and said, "Do you think there's ever a time we could go for lunch or coffee?" And I said, "Sure." So we met, a month later at a coffee shop, and I'm thinking she wants to get into it or something. Like I don't know why she wants to go for coffee with me. And so we're having this lunch, and she just wants to tell stories. She wants to hear about my kids, and she wants to hear about Nancy, and she wants to hear background to my work. And
Steve,
yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 sec. Could I get you to pull? I think your lapel is banging your microphone.
Oh yes, yes.
The lapel on your sweater is.
Yeah, I'll pull it away.
And I don't want people to be distracted because you're preaching the good word
with my hands too. It's like rubbing this thing.
It's rubbing your iPhone mic.
Your iPhone mic is hitting your zipper, I think.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll just
something like that.
Okay.
Come on, girl, get comfy.
I
girl.
just want people to see the merch. Okay. Sorry, carry on.
Okay. So
and what a chest.
That's much perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Not bad for a 60-year-old, eh?
Hey.
So anyway, at the end of the conversation, I said, I'm just curious why you come to my concert. I said, I know that you are a committed atheist. I'm a committed Christian. What are you getting out of this? And I've never forgotten this. She says, you know what? I come to your concerts and you tell your stories and they make me laugh and they make me cry and they make me sad and they arise empathy. And when you tell your stories, she says, they're unassailable. They're your stories. I don't think, is that true? That happened to you. You're telling me a story. And she said, I can go home and I can compare it to my story and it helps me think about mine. And she says, I really love that. She said, I come because you tell your stories. And then she said, if you ever tell me my story, you'll never see me again.
Whoa.
Oh, that's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
You know, and I come out of a Christian tradition where often the person at the front, whether it's a minister or an artist and stuff, they feel it's their job to tell the audience their story and what they need.
No.
You know, and it's insulting, profoundly. You know, but if I share my story, I mean, you're being welcomed into someone's tender places. That's an honor. If I tell you your story, it's oppressive. It's a violence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's
heavy.
That's heavy. That is so heavy. I need a minute.
I will say that, like, you know, when we write, we often we follow these different tendrils. You follow these different stories. And without a doubt, the songs that mean the most to us are the songs that are our own stories.
Yeah.
And every time we try and write somebody else's story,
we can't do it.
We can't do it. And I have so much respect for artists that do, because I think there are some of the great folk singers that can do that. They can sing the song for the everyman.
Yeah.
But what's worked for us is, like, when we tell our story, we hope to leave enough room that maybe people can connect, can relate to that story. It doesn't have to be theirs, but they can relate to our version of it. That shared humanity, right?
Yeah. I'm the same.
That's so cool.
I've got friends that can sit down and tell a story in a song that's not their story, and they're great at it. And I do love, but I've never been able to do that. And every time I've tried, I push those songs out there, and I just feel something feels vacuous to me, you know. So I end up just those songs sort of die on the vine.
Yeah.
In the end, you know.
Yeah, we had a really fun little sort of side conversation with one of the commenters a few weeks back, where somebody was like, "Would you guys please?" Can't remember. I'm paraphrasing, and he was much more polite about it. But would you guys please just write a happy song, for God's sake? And I was kind of like, you know, let's talk about this, because I don't want to write a happy song, and it made me think. Like I ended up thinking about this for quite a while after, because it was like, it's not about happy or sad, but it's about, like, what is the function for me? Because at the end of the day, like, I love that my music, our music, your music, can touch people. And I would love to be able to say that that's my motivation, but it's not. It's a wonderful byproduct, but I don't make music because I know it's going to do somebody good. I make music because it makes me feel really good. I mean, obviously there's more to it than just feeling good, but it brings me comfort. It brings me joy. Being able to have a creative outlet is incredibly important for me to be a balanced person. But at the end of the day, you know, making someone else feel good is just a really, really great byproduct. And it certainly helps perpetuate it. But for me, you know, writing in particular, is cathartic. It's a catharsis for me, and it's one of the ways, because and I've said this before on our little show here, but like I've always struggled with sharing how I feel, and I think there's a lot of people, a lot of men of our generation that are not good at that, and so music has been a bit of a bridge for me to find a way to process feelings that I have a hard time sharing with other people that maybe some other folks might have a better time of doing. And that's what music is for me. So if my music seems overly sad, it's because this is how I process sadness, or one of the ways. I'm learning many other ways. I'm learning to lean on my wife and my family and my friends. But that's been a work in progress. Whereas music has always been something I can use for that. And I think, like, the times that we have told a story from another perspective is when we basically tell our own story but change the names,
right? Yeah,
you know. And those are the times, like, I think of songs like, I can't think of any actually off the top of my head. They're all pretty autobiographical.
I know what you mean. The only cover songs, and I do a lot of covers on my albums. Like, every album I have has got 3 or 4 of somebody else's songs on them, but they're not just because I liked that song. It's because, in a sense, that said for me something I couldn't say for myself, and so it is my song.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that sense, right? So but even with my songwriting, and again, not everybody functions this way. I don't write songs to entertain you. Like that's just not in my head. This is my spiritual process. It's how I pray. It's these are I'm showing you my journal when I
Yeah.
sing you my song. This is
Dear diary.
yeah, it is a dear diary, right? And it is like, as a Christian, we're supposed to pray, and I don't understand really. I've never been a great prayer. I can't sit in a room and address God and sort of stay focused and feel like I'm communing with the deity. But when the songs come, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Like that's how I pray. Um, so I don't really have, my songs don't have an agenda um, uh, when I'm writing them for you or for an audience or for a market.
Yeah.
They just don't. Once they're done, and they're recorded and you're putting them out, you might say, "Oh, I can market this to there." Fair enough, but that's not the cause. That's not the source that I have an agenda for someone out there, either to get an exchange of money or fame or whatever. That's just not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something that I want to come back to, because this was actually incredibly powerful little piece of information that you gave to Dave and I'll never forget it. And I remember exactly where we were. So one of the things I want to give some history to as well is that, before I say what I'm about to say, and just to kind of perpetuate sort of our own story here for folks, is that when I was in your band, you were one of the very first people I played my music for. And I'd been playing with Tim Elias, and
Mm-hmm.
he gave me an ancient Mac computer and interface to do some recording on his music, and I wound up using it to record a couple of demos of my own. The first of which was a song called Our Love, and then the second of which was a song called Firecracker, which were our two songs off of our first record. So those are the very first songs I finished writing and recorded as demos, and I played them for you one day in the van. You had picked me up. I'd fallen on some hard times. I'd moved back to my mom's place. You guys picked me up at my mom's place, and we were driving to the airport.
I remember that morning. Yep.
And we were talking about something, and you said, "Hey, Joey, do you have any music?" And I said, "Oh yeah, actually, I got these two songs. Maybe I can play them for you." And we put them on in the van, and everybody listened through them, and I was so freaked and nervous. And the second song ended, and you just sort of turned around and said, "You got to do this. You just have to make." It wasn't this like profoundly encouraging moment. It was just like you were telling me the truth, and you said, "You just need to make your own music. You have to do that." These, it wasn't like, "These are great songs. What amazing recordings." It was just like, "You got to do this, man." And it was like, oh man, maybe I should do this. And then, eventually it turned into the Brothers Landreth, and, we are where we are now. So that's an important piece of the story. The other side of that story was, you said, whenever you want, anytime you want, as long as I'm not using it, I'll cut you a key from my studio and you can come and use it. And we ended up recording tons of music in your place. You never charged us a cent. You gave us access to a facility we never would have been. We never would have been able to afford.
Could never
because
have
we
made the record
no,
that we made.
we Let It Lie would not be what it is without Signpost, and neither would my first solo record, Whiskey. Bunch of like all the overdubs pretty much were. Actually, no, Whiskey was recorded here. I'm sorry. 87, we did a bunch of overdubs there.
Yeah.
Hindsight, we did a bunch with Roman. Like, so much recording has been done there, and it was really important. But we finished doing some recording. We played you some stuff, and we walked out into the lobby of Signpost when we were on the Let It Lie sessions. Sorry, this is long-winded, but
That's good.
You said, music sounds really great, guys. And I said, I'm really worried that people aren't going to get it. And at that point in time, we had no gauge by which to measure how people were going to receive our music, because I had only been a sideman, known as a bit of a gunslinger, and Dave, kind of same thing, was a sideman. So we were under the impression that when people found out that we were making music together, that I was worried that there was this preconceived notion of what it would be like. Little did I know that people did not care at all. But you said to me, and this is something that has been one of the very many sort of mission statements that drive our business. You said, you don't worry like, don't ever worry about who is going to listen to it. Just make the music that lands with you, and then the job is finding the people who like it.
Yeah.
So, because if you like it, someone else will like it, and that's all you need. And that has been the driving force behind what we do. You know, and that's all. That's like, that's our gauge when we know we've got something good, is when we finish a song and go, I think I like that.
Yeah.
And Dave goes, yeah, me too. Great. We got a song.
And because of that, we've only had to be true to ourselves. And when we first started this, we had the idea to start this band. We had a handful of songs, but we were like, okay, well, we want to, like, what do we like? What kind of music do we like? Well, we want to be tough. We want to be cool.
Yeah.
Steampunk. I was listening to lots of Kings of Leon.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the moment we stopped trying and just wrote the stuff that came honestly, the stories, the words, let the sounds that that were in our hearts, in our heads, whatever, come out. Oh, is that spam? That's just spam.
That's spam.
You know, that was the moment that we became the band that we are today.
Do you know what? That's so key though. And I mean, if you, I think you probably know, I was a huge Bruce Cockburn fan, still am.
Yeah. You did a whole record.
Yeah, I did a whole record of my favorite Bruce Cockburn songs. A lot of my early guitar playing was patterned after his right hand, not so much his left hand, but the kind of rhythms that he gets. That's all Bruce Cockburn, and I loved everything he did. I loved him, with the sort of the spiritual ambience of his lyrics. I was just smitten by him. I desperately wanted, and I loved his political commentary. And I also loved the fact that if he had an angry opinion about a sort of a social situation, he just sort of came out with it. And if it needed a little bit extra, oomph, he would drop the F-bomb just to make sure everybody knew exactly how he felt about the situation. And I remember a few times trying to write sort of politically charged songs, and because that's kind of what I appreciate in other my hero, and they just came out so lame. I'm Steve Bell. I've got this sweet voice, I mean, I've got a steady vibrato, and I get letters all the time about how people put their kids to sleep with my music. I mean, that's, and it was, but I desperately wanted to be Bruce. I wanted to be Tom Waite. Everybody I listened to was kind of badass and tough and said something meaningful things. And then if I wrote my songs, there was a lullaby beauty to them. And I was almost embarrassed by them.
Yeah.
So I was one time doing a concert in Chicago. Do you guys know Res Band, Glenn Kaiser? Does that ring a bell? So this would be maybe more 70s, 80s Christian rock band. And they lived in a community called Jesus People USA in this old, with a bunch of other people. Yeah, so I was doing a concert at their little coffee shop. And Glenn Kaiser was the leader of Res Band. He's a star. I looked up to him, and I was wondering, if I get there, am I going to meet this guy? Is he going to be around? He's probably on the road. Well, it turned out he did sound for me at this little concert in their place. I was so nervous. And I did my concert, and at the end, it was really funny. He came up to me and he said, "Good job." I said, "Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Kaiser." I don't know how to even talk to him. And out of the blue, he said, "Just how much do you love Bruce Cockburn?" And I says, "Well, fair bit." And he says, "Well, it shows." And he says, "And that's good. I mean, he deserves that kind of adoration." He says, "It'll be really shame if Steve Bell never shows up to a concert."
Oh,
yeah, like
whoa,
yeah. So he said an affirming thing. Good job. You play well, you sing well, you executed your thing, but. I can go to Bruce Cockburn concert any day. It'd be a shame if I never saw a Steve Bell concert. And that really, it unnerved me.
Of course it would.
But that, it was the most complimentary criticism I've ever had.
That's a kindness sandwich right there with one piece of bread missing.
Yeah. Isn't that great? And then I had to go home and learn how to I had to make peace with Steve Bell.
Yeah.
Steve Bell doesn't do this. Steve Bell doesn't do that. Other people do that really well, and I can celebrate that. But the only thing of any value that I have to offer the world is me. Right? And it turns out I'm the best Steve Bell on the planet, as it turns out. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, honey. Yes.
I have zero competition in the marketplace.
That's amazing.
You know, and so
Yeah.
if I can let other people be who they are and bless them and celebrate them and be grateful for the contribution, but then, you know, for me in my prayer to come before God and say, who am I? What did you create me to be? And can you help me get there? You know? And then what I find, and this I think comes joy to, I think maybe what you've liked about concerts of mine, I think is from what I hear there, but people love it when you show up, when you, the real person, show up.
Yeah.
And that in the end is what people like about what I do, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully the craft is good and I want to be excellent at it and all that, but yeah.
Well, I think that part is the 1-2 punch, but I think it's also been really evident in your whole career because people show up to your speaking engagements, people buy your books, people read the liner notes of your record. Like, people are here for what you do, and that is was one of the things that I think that we've learned from you over these years, over and over and over again, is that if you step, you know, and you've never said what you just said, you've never said to us, but I have learned that from you, just from watching you do it. And like stepping into your own clothes, stepping into your own skin and being who you are. And that was like, I went through a phase where I had done a bunch of touring with Donovan Woods, and he has this completely other thing, which is incredible. And I loved the way he brought his humor to what he does, and I thought, okay, well, I'm a kind of funny guy, I can do that too. So I went through this phase of like of trying to be like that, and there were little pieces that I kept because I thought, oh, you know, when I genuinely do something stupid and acknowledge it on stage, people think that's funny, and I think it's funny. So that's a moment I'll keep that for me. But actually, like, maybe telling a full-on joke with a punchline, that doesn't land. You know, you
People
pick,
aren't showing up for your bit.
No, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm pretty funny, but maybe I'm just my own biggest fan. I don't know.
You're hilarious.
There's
hilarious.
like little pieces that you pick, and you realize that as you go through the process of figuring out who you are, you can see, oh, that is me. This is not me. You know, I dropped an F-bomb on stage. I think I can count on one hand how many times I've said the F word on stage. And there was one time, and the last time I did it, I was in New York City, and I was struggling with the show. And I talked about this a little while ago, but I was struggling with the show, and I was like, I need some injection of energy to just kickstart. I'm just struggling so hard. And I said, I can't remember what I said exactly, but it came out of my mouth and was like, well, that wasn't it. You know. And then I lived inside my own head the entire time, just being like, why did you do that? And that was just one of those things, like, I don't do that. I don't say that on stage, you know, and that's just not a part of my thing. When I watch somebody else do it, I'm like, man, that's the cool. Like, I watched Butch Walker tell a crowd one time to shut the F up, but he did it in a way that wasn't cringy. It was just like awesome. And I was like, that's sweet. I wish I could, but I can't. That's not me.
Some people swearing as an art form, like Joe Pesci, right? Like, it's just like you'll go to a movie just to hear him just put out a streak. He's just great, you know. I dropped.
Sorry, go ahead.
I've only dropped the F-bomb once in concert, and it was to a group of nuns. This actually happened.
Joey was hoping that
this would come up because I was like,
please tell this story.
I want to preface this with. Actually, no. I'll
get out of the way. Let
get out of the way.
Story.
Tell us about.
Well, it was just I had a story, and it's actually from my father, because my father's a Baptist minister and a preacher, and he dropped the F-bomb in a sermon once when I was like 8 years old, and it staggered me. Like, my mom just about had a heart attack, and like, it was. So you're sitting there. I've heard my dad preach a bunch of times, and he always used to tell the story of an interaction that he had with a prison inmate at Drumheller, where he was the chaplain. I said earlier I learned to play guitar in Drumheller prison, and I didn't tell that story. My dad was the chaplain at Drumheller prison, and the inmates used to have jam sessions in the chapel. And when they heard that I wanted to play, they invited me into their circle. And so I grew up in this circle of musicians jamming in a chapel and Drumheller circle in prison. That's how I got started. So Dad was telling this story, and he was in a relationship with this one inmate that was a bit of a struggle. And at one point, this I forget, the guy said something to Dad where the F word was a significant part of the communication. And so whenever Dad told that story, he would quote the line, and then he just sort of air F, right? Like the word, and we'd all get that that's what that guy had said. I'd heard this sermon many times before in this story, and I'm in this church service, and my dad's at the front preaching, and I know this line is coming. I'm not really paying attention. I know the whole thing, and for whatever reason that day, Dad didn't airdrop the F. He just said it, and my head snapped up. This is like, what? And this is like 1968 in a conservative Baptist church in northern Alberta. You can understand that would be a fairly shocking thing. I've never loved my dad as much as that day. And there was just something about it. And I think the reason was because it was the right thing to do at the time. And I just remember he wasn't being gratuitous, obviously, but somehow that word needed to be said that day in that context, and Dad was brave enough to do it.
Mm.
But it wasn't his shtick. Like,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not like, that's not the deal at all. So anyway, and now I've told the story of my dad telling that story in concert, and I was doing a retreat to a group of nuns in northern Alberta. It's like 20 of us in the room, all these sweet nuns. And for whatever reason, and Dave is sitting at the back doing sound, my manager, and sound man and producer. And for whatever reason, I'm telling this story, and it just came out twice. I think I referred to the sentence twice and said it. And I was so caught up in the moment, I wasn't really thinking about it. And then afterward, Dave came up to me, and he's just like, his eyes were like this big, like, do you know where you are? Not a single nun commented on it. Like, it was an integral part of the story. And it was important at that time to say what I said. It was fine. But I don't feel I have a mandate.
Yeah.
Now to be a crude badass guy, like, that's not who I am.
Because at the end of the day, we're a bunch of soft boys.
Yeah,
We make soft boy music. Like Dave and I have started saying this thing like, "You ready? All right, let's soft rock." And I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I'm here for it. I think the thing that I loved about that story was actually, this is just a game of telephone now, but I on one of the tours, Dave Ziglinski, your manager and our dear friend, and I were rooming together, and he just very flippantly, because Dave has such a particular way of talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, one time Steve said the F word twice on stage with to a covenant of none, and then he got a standing ovation." and then moved on. It was like, wait, what? Only Steve Bell can drop the F-bomb at a nun convent and get a standing ovation.
Oh, that's funny. I wish people knew Dave, because if you know Dave, that is even funnier, right?
Yeah,
because he has a way of talking and telling his stories that is they're very Dave.
Very Dave, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
I want to pay attention to a couple comments here, Steve. We Will O'Donnell is in the comment section saying today is Byron's birthday.
Oh, really?
Happy birthday, Byron O'Donnell.
Happy birthday, Byron O'Donnell. Thanks, Will. I'll phone your dad. Byron O'Donnell is, I think, one of the greatest songwriters to ever come out of Winnipeg. He more country. I played in one of his bands. Well, I played in several of his bands for about a decade. In the late 80s, and just a brilliant songwriter. Mm-hmm. He and I actually, and Larry Campbell actually we rented a suite for a year. It was called the Hit Pip. And and we'd go every day to write songs. We decided, we had read a story about who's the guy that wrote "Mama Told Me Not to Come"?
Steve.
Oh, you know him. He writes now for Disney.
Yeah. Such a great song.
Oh, come on.
Al.
No. Anyway, great prolific songwriter.
Not Randy Newman.
Randy Newman.
Is Randy Newman. I mean, of course you're speaking of Randy Newman.
Yes, Randy Newman.
Randy Newman.
So I read an article about him. No, Byron did, actually, that Randy Newman had a discipline of writing a song a day. He went to the office every day at 9. and he wrote a song before. It was just it was a self-imposed rule that he'd write a song before he's allowed to do anything else. So if he had a meeting at 10, he had an hour. If he had a meeting at
Wow.
9:30, he had a half an hour. And if you only have half an hour and you have to write the worst piece of garbage, he says, but it had to have song form. It had to kind of basically rhyme. It had to have a verse and a chorus and a bridge. And then you record it. And he said, the deal was that I never, ever, 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 ever have to play it for anybody.
Right.
And so you're
Never
free.
has to see the light of day.
Right. So 5 days a week, back then anyways, Randy Newman wrote a song. And he said almost none of those songs ever made the light of day. But it was the discipline of diving into the creative process without being motivated by heartbreak or anxiety or angst. Because I mean, in my when I was a younger man, if my heart wasn't broken, I couldn't write a song. And that had to change. And so we got this little suite, and Larry had a room, and I had a room, and Byron had a room, and we all we'd go there at 9:00 in the morning and stay there for usually till about noon. And the rule was that we weren't allowed to talk to each other unless it was to invite the other person in to help you with the song. That was it. And I sat there every day feeling like an idiot. Like I'd play a G chord and I'd go, nah. Play an A chord, nah. Like I just felt dumb. And Byron was cranking out like 30 songs every 30 minutes. Like it was just the guy just writes and writes and writes, and everything's a gem, and I just felt awful, and I felt embarrassed and inadequate. But there was something about that process or that discipline that about 4 or 5 months kicked in. And all of a sudden I started showing up there, and the river started to flow. And I ended up writing the bulk of my first 4 albums in about 6 months.
Wild.
Yeah. So you broke the psychological dam, and out comes all these songs.
Yeah. And that's part of this weirdness about the artistic thing, because it's a bizarre combination of sort of anarchy where there's no rules, and then discipline of showing up to the work, like as if you had a labor job and you're supposed to be there at 9, and so you go and you do your job, and there's some combination. I don't really know how it works, but I do know when I just sort of say I'm going to write when I feel like writing. Songs come pretty far and few between, but when I show up and I put that guitar in my hand on a regular basis, and it doesn't have to be 4:00 in the morning when I'm sad. It could be 9:00 in the morning, and it's a combination of showing up in a disciplined way, but learning how to show up with an open heart and openness that when you're younger needs an experience of some sort for you to get to that place.
Can I launch into a segue?
Yep.
From there, I'm feeling really inspired by what you're saying. So my wife Roberta is a graphic designer.
Yes, she is.
You've launched. There's some of her handiwork right there. That turned out so beautifully.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
But so this isn't the reason for my segue. But I would love to just say, like, we would not be the band that we are today. I don't even know if we would be a band if it wasn't for your input. My wife credits you as the reason she has the business that she has. She's been a graphic designer for the last 7 years and has been incredibly successful. You guys won a Juno together for artwork on your first record. You gave her her first shot and launched her career for her. And she absolutely credits you for that first start. And small fact, but you guys were nominated for a Juno the same year that we were nominated for ours.
Yeah.
And you guys footed the bill. You guys sent Roberta to the Junos with us. We could not have afforded to do it otherwise. And you guys made sure that we were able to go together, and we won Junos back to back.
That was what a glorious moment that was. That was
a good day.
We were doing our post-win interview, and Dave left halfway through because they were announcing Roberta's category, and then she won. Roberta has won more music awards than we have.
She has more music hardware at home than I do, significantly.
Significantly, yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. I remember that. I remember Nancy and I just like going out of our minds, like, wow, that was just like that you guys and her the same night won the highest
literally back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? That I didn't.
Yeah. Within two, like 1 or 2 awards. Like it was, we were still backstage doing all the receivership stuff that you do at the award show. Not that I've done this more than once, but after you win an award, apparently there's a bunch of junk you got to do. So we're in the middle of doing all these interviews with people pronouncing our band name incorrectly. Like congratulations to the Brothers Labyrinth for winning their heavy metal award. And then Dave had to split. It's like, sorry, I have to leave. Our
publicist is, so we're on TV. We're getting interviewed on TV for this thing, like internet TV. They're recording it. They're going to post it later. And our publicist is like, what are you doing? Like, she's like miming, like, sit down. Joanne Sederington was sitting there. Go, sit down. Not now. I'm like, I'm going. And it's just like, I bolt halfway through. It's on the internet. You can track it down. It's pretty endearing. If I dare so say.
It's cute.
And I run through, and there's a big security guard that's blocking backstage from the audience.
Dave's like, get out of the way, Tiny. I got to go meet my wife.
He's like, if you go, you're not coming back. And I was like, it's like my Field of Dreams moment. It's like, I don't even care. And I rush out and
Field
I
of Dreams?
knee slide right beside Roberta's chair as she wins the award. And then she gets sucked into the step and repeat and the whole thing. But anyways, so that's not the reason for my segue, but it's a beautiful story and just an example of how you've further impacted our lives in a huge way. But the thing that I wanted to talk about is, so, Roberta is an incredibly disciplined creative in that.
Right.
So from her, I've learned that, she does not approach creativity the same way because she doesn't have the luxury. She needs to be maintaining an incredible creative output because she has so many clients that need such a variety of work all the time.
Yeah.
So she goes to work creatively. Whereas I think, Joey, you and I, we want to feel the muse. We want to feel inspired.
It's emotional.
We don't like to write if we're not in the mood. Oh, today's too nice of a day. We should go for a coffee instead. Today's too lousy of a day. Let's wait till the sun comes out.
I'm too tired.
I'm too tired. I got too much energy. Like whatever. Any million things could come up that would distract us from writing songs. But Roberta goes to work every day. Yeah. And her work is incredibly deep and really beautiful. Mm-hmm. But she's worked that muscle. It's like she's taught me that creativity is also a muscle. As much as she has moments where, man, the muse strikes and she is so lit up. She's so excited about what she's done. She also knows that sometimes you just got to go to the well and just keep working until you find something.
There's that beautiful
reminds me of this hit pit a little bit.
There's this beautiful quote that Tom Waits said, I can't remember exactly the language, but he basically says, the songs don't come from me. The song's a bird and I'm just a windowsill. And I always loved that imagery, but I was like, there's this almost non-committal attitude to that just is like, I don't know, man, it just happens. But the reality is in order for the bird to land in the windowsill, you must be a windowsill. Yeah. The sun must be shining. The windowsill maybe is a little bit open. You're not just sitting there waiting for the muse to strike. You have to create an environment. And sometimes when it happens, it feels like this is just pouring down from the heavens. But it's like, no, it's a culmination of a lot of hard work, and it's a culmination of focus. Even Dave and I, we struggle with writing. Writing is probably, for me, it's my least strongest thing.
We're not prolific by any stretch.
We
write exactly as many songs as we need to get the next record.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Put me in a room with a guitar and a guitar amp and say, make some music. I can come up with things nonstop. Yeah. But ask me to write a song, give me 8 months and I might have something that you don't want to listen to. Yeah.
In the poetry world, so I think you guys both know Malcolm Guite, or who he is. Anyways, he's an English poet. But there, in poetry, there is some of that sort of charismatic. People sort of sit down to the page and stuff flows, but it's hard work. Poets will edit for years before putting a poem, like a 4-stanza poet out sometimes, and they'll submit it to friends who will just brutal criticism, and it'll come back and they'll work at it more. It's labor. And it's great labor, but there's real suffering in the labor. Where I think for some reason musicians, because I don't know what it is about us. I think with musicians there's a higher chance of celebrity, and so there's a kind of a romance that goes with being a music star, and people think that we're sort of just this stuff flows out of us. But I think for most of us that have a long career, the earlier we can get over that fantasy, the earlier we can get down to the good hard work of making art so that others can flourish, so.
Yeah. I mean, we come to the studio. I mean, I get to the studio every morning between 9 and 10 a.m. and Dave and I get to work on the record at 1:30 in the afternoon. Like there is a schedule. There is, and it's like there's elements of it that's just like, I'm not feeling this. Let's move on and see if something else flows. But we I like the way you say that. We go to the well every day.
Yeah.
When we're working on the record.
Yeah.
Well, when it's record time.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing you got to take care of too, though, is that there's also seasons, right? So if you're, there's output and there's input, like, so you have to replenish, and if you never replenish, then all kinds of hazardous things happen. And so that's why music, or art in general, is such deeply spiritual work, because you're pouring out. Let me use from my own tradition. The story about Jesus was that Jesus, the word is kenosis, poured out of himself. And that doesn't mean that he laid down on the road and let himself be a mat for other people to roll over. But there was it was the investment of the self that made him who he was. And you realize that the art process is literally an emptying, right? If you're not emptying, you're making widgets. You're not making art. And so then comes with that, and again in all the spiritual traditions, but from the one I'm familiar with, Christianity, there's a time to withdraw. Right? Jesus is always withdrawing to the desert to pray or be quiet, or he's taking his disciples and just going off to a garden somewhere. It's constantly so engagement, withdrawal, and it's just it kind of goes back and forth. And I just think there's wisdom in that, so of course we can't show up to the creative output well every day, all the time. You have to, part of growing older and maturing is recognizing the signs that the well is getting empty before it's disaster. Because once it's empty, you'll go to all sorts of means to fill that up. I mean, this is where so many of our addictions come from, and bad behaviors. You're just like in a panic to fill that thing up, and there's, and that just shows a lack of sort of understanding of how this works, I think.
That is so beautiful. I love, because now we call that, that's self-care. We laud self-care. It's like we've been doing that for 2,000 years or longer, man. Like, you're empty, you got to fill up. Go take that quiet time. Go look after you. Do you need to Netflix and chill? Do you need to
And it's just kind of coming back into popularity to take care of yourself.
Well, I think it's always existed. It just looks different. The way the conversations around it are different. So, man, this has been a beautiful conversation. I don't want to wrap it, but we do a couple different things with this. Our variety show, Steve, is that we love to open it up to all the people that are listening to ask some questions.
Okay.
So I would invite anybody on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you are listening, to please send in the comments, drop some questions for Steve. We can see them. We'll stick them on the. You want to do the thingy?
I just need to zoom in because I can't see.
Because you can't see.
And before we go into that, just let me tell you a quick. I got a little drop down. My kids are having a bit of a back and forth conversation while this is going on, and Micah, my son, says, "Wake me up if they talk about me."
Hey, Micah.
So there you go.
Anyway. No, I don't think there are too many questions.
Yeah. I saw one earlier though that I wanted to. So Philip Mantel says, Joey, I remember seeing you live and you pretended to have misplaced your slide and played the next solo without it. Do you sometimes use those things for entertainment, connecting to the audience? I never have pretended to misplace my slide. That is a real life thing that sometimes happens. But there was, I've never done anything deliberately manipulative with the crowd, like pretend to do something, pretend to lose a lyric. At the end of the day, I don't want to make a mockery of myself. I do actually just want to do my job good. But I recognize those moments to be a great opportunity to have a human moment with the audience. I will, however, there is one time that I was dishonest with a crowd, and I actually ended up going back and playing that same show a handful of years later solo, and finally came clean. So I was on. We were playing Fort Francis, Ontario. We were playing that little barn gig.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yep.
It's really lovely people. And we were on stage. We were in the middle of a song, and we were about to start. I was about to start singing. It was one of the tunes I start by myself, and my, I can't remember if it was before I was sober or not, but I basically stifled a burp. But then it ended up sounding like kind of a choke,
Right.
And I said, I panicked because it was horrible. It was just like into the microphone. And I said, anybody see that bug flying in my throat? And people were like, oh my God, are you okay? And I just like couldn't shake it. And so finally, like I went back and played the show and I was like, listen, I gotta come clean with you guys. I did not swallow a bug. I actually just burped.
That's funny.
Or like my voice cracked or something. So that's the only time I've ever actually been deceitful with an audience. So that's that. But okay, so let's
go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
So, but at the same time, I mean, like, and I'm one for being honest and all that, but I do have some shtick. Like I have some, and you've seen me. I have some go-to stories, and I've learned to tell them in a way that there's a bit of a punchline, or there's a bit of an aha moment, and sometimes it's funny, sometimes and so I do that, and when things work, I will repeat it. What in the same way, a comedian that is just really hilarious tonight and sounds like he just said that joke for the first time, he or she, they said that the next night and they said that the night before. Mm-hmm. They're not being dishonest.
No, certainly not. And no, definitely, you're definitely true. And there are moments for us too. Like we have things that we come back to, and you do, you deliver the merch pitch enough times to know that like there's a way that this comes across in the right way, and it feels impactful. It brings people to the table, but it doesn't feel like begging. So so everybody feels good about it. Or when you sing clean and you talk about your journey with working on your mental health, those you wind up coming to markers where that if I deliver this honest story this way, it lands best. And that's true. But I've never full on lied to try to make people laugh.
Okay. I got to tell a great Dave Zaglinski, my manager's story. So this was years ago, and we were on a fairly long tour out in the East Coast, and this is back in the day when we were billeting in houses because we can't afford hotels. So you're exhausted from all the relentless relating, and we were doing noon hour shows in colleges and evening concerts and in communities and travel. We were exhausted, and the very last gig was a Sunday morning at a church in Halifax, and then after that service, we're getting on a plane and flying home. I was beyond myself exhausted, emotionally, physically, and I get up on stage. And I've got like a 5-song set before the sermon or something, if I remember correctly. And for whatever reason, I started to tell a story about my foster daughter. And it was a sad story. And the story just got the best of me. And I ended up having a complete meltdown on stage, like sobbing snot, unable to continue. It was long, it was embarrassing, it was ugly. And I finally managed to finish, and I'm embarrassed. I'm humiliated about this. Wow, we sold so many CDs. It was like the people at it was a mob. It was a feeding frenzy at the CD table afterwards. So, anyways, here's the story. And if you know Dave, it's really funny. So we're driving to the airport, and I'm quiet, and Dave's quiet, and I'm fully expecting Dave to give me a bit of a lecture about pull it together, man. That was.
I know where this is going.
Yeah,
those tears are too real.
Well, too much honesty. I mean, and there is a point where you're not sharing, you're dumping, right? And so I'm feeling bad because that's what happened, And Dave's driving. He's got his funny looking face. He goes, "You think you could do that again?" So it was the best, So there you go.
Go up, Joe. Grab the question from Pierre.
Pierre Bohemian.
Yeah.
Here,
questions for Steve.
I love that. think you can bring
you can
those
do that?
waterworks on again. What do we got to do? Onions backstage? Okay, here's one from our pal Pierre Bohemier. Hey guys, looking back to your early days in Elias Stritton Bell, you wrote a beautiful song, Jenny, which the Bros covered. What's the story behind that wonderful song? Thanks for the music.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's one of my first that's actually a signature song for me. It sort of launched my career back in the day. So I'd have been 18-ish. And I was starting out in the music business. And I was playing the clubs in Winnipeg and different bands, and basically really super broke and starving, all that. And I ended up there's a couple that loved my music and knew I was struggling, and they said, you know what, we want to support you. This is an example of me being supported in the way I like to support other people. And they said, come sleep on our couch. We'll feed you. We'll take care of your bills until you get on your feet. And so basically what happened was they had a little girl named Jenny. She was about 1.5 years old. And because I had my days free, I worked nights. I spent a lot of time with her. And this was my first adult relationship with a child where I was just smitten. I loved this kid and she loved me. We were just the best buds. We hung out every day. I just adored her. And on her second birthday, I was talking to her mom and saying, man, I have no money. What can I give Jenny? You know? And her mom said, could you write a song? That would be something she'd have for the rest of her life. And so that's really where that song came from.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's a great song. We've played it together many times, and always such a highlight.
Was that on the Pilgrimage record?
Yeah. You guys covered that there was that sort of that tribute record that several artists, and you guys picked that song and did a gorgeous version of it. Yeah,
we went in. We were on the road. We were on the West Coast, and we went and recorded it with Roy.
Yeah,
Roy Salmon.
Yeah, and he's in here, I think.
He was in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Howdy, Roy. You know what? And I'm going to quickly interject. There's another thing that we do on this show, and I don't know why we do it.
What do we do?
We have some younger viewers that tune in every week. Well, their dad does, Ben.
Oh yeah, and so they're in Wales.
They're in Wales, and every time we do this show, it's about Nell and Mabley, or it's roughly about their bedtime. They're getting into their PJs. They're thinking about crashing. So we tell them to go to bed. So would you join us? We're going to tell Nell and Mabley. You go first. You deliver it. Your grandpa.
What's the second?
Mabley.
Nell and Mabley. It's time. Yeah. Tomorrow's going to be a really good day. Go to sleep. Trust it. It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
Trust in the process.
Trust in the process. Yeah. You're in your Jimmy Jams. You're about to brush your teeth. You're all.
Don't forget to floss.
Don't forget to floss, because remember what Uncle Dave says: if you brush your teeth and don't floss, it's like going to the bathroom and only wiping your butt cheeks.
It's exactly like that.
But tomorrow's another day. You're gonna have a really, really great one.
Yep.
I was looking for a question here.
Okay.
How do you? Oh yeah, here's a great one. Click on that one.
Which one?
The very bottom one, right there.
This one?
Yep. Okay, Steve, this one's for you.
That's a really great point about honesty. I find that I'm often afraid of dumping on my audience and end up shying away from sharing or being personal. How do you walk the fine line between sharing being vulnerable and dumping on your audience?
Yeah, you don't want to treat your audience as your unpaid therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There is a fine line, and I don't know if I have a really good advice. Part of it is honest feedback. Like Nancy is super supportive. My wife is super supportive of me, but not at all shy to say, you know what, that was over a line, I was uncomfortable there. And Dave, who I've maybe done less than 10 concerts out of my thousands of concerts over the years without him. He's always there, and he's also not shy of saying, so it really, sometimes you don't know. And so you need some sort of feedback. I think other times you kind of know it in your spirit that you just used your audience, and that's that. And I know there's many times I've done that. I can just feel that little bit of shame. I usually when I'm going to bed at night and I'm turning off the light, I kind of feel, man, that wasn't right.
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful, I think. And again, part of it is growing older, but learning how to sort of take the temperature of your soul so you know what's actually going on there. I don't know how to describe that, but
Yeah.
you basically in the end, you
Yeah.
kind of know that you just used your audience, and that's you need to not do that.
For me, if I can add to that just a tiny bit, and again, another thing that I learned from you is that just the way you rehearse the band and you organize your set list, you choose your moments where, for us, when we're putting together a set list, okay, we're going to walk into this next song. You don't want a long introduction before every song. You don't need to tell this story from
Right.
every single song. But I really found it helpful to have a long think about what is it I want to say.
Yeah.
So that I'm not going into it winging it, going like, I'm going to have this really profound moment and it's just going to be amazing. And then you get up there and you get nervous or whatever happens and throws you off. And then it's not the moment that you were expecting. I do think a certain amount of preparation is really, really important because the more prepared you are for a moment, the better you're going to be able to deliver it once those nerves set in. Once the X factors of the room, maybe the crowd is not that receptive to stories. I mean, like we played a show one time in Denmark, and at the merch table, somebody was like, Danish people don't want to hear the stories. I was like, okay. So when I play in Denmark, I tell less stories, and I've noticed that it goes over a lot better. And they're just and maybe part of it is like maybe English is not so much a thing, or what culturally it's just not something they want to see. You'll get to know that too. But I think what really helped me was deciding the moments when I was going to share, and then responding improvisationally in the moment. So I've got the foundation of the story down. I've got the foundation of what I want to share and how I want to share it, and then the better that moment gets, then I can be free with it and I can improvise and I can bounce off of the audience. But I think if you go in winging it, for me, that's always been when I've had sort of disastrous moments. But the more and more you work on your moments and your material, and you consider what kind of effect they're going to have, the better and better you get at it. And then it does become easier to kind of get up on stage and just be like, man, I got this thing on my heart and I want to share it. But you have to have that foundation, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I think it's a little easier for me because I do so many churches, and so I'm going into a community that recognize themselves, their own culture, right? But to go in, and I've often, when I'm doing churches, and I'll talk to the pastor and say, so what's going on here? Like, who are your people?
Yeah.
And sort of have an idea so I can have some kind of respect for them. That this is, if I'm going to invite you into this art making, this artistic dialogue, I have to have some respect for who you are, right? And so just because I sang that song last night and people stood up and yelled and clapped and screamed and celebrated it does not mean that this crowd's going to do that. And I know you guys have had this experience. You do a concert and it's electric. Like everything you say, they laugh, they scream at the end of every song. The next night, none of that happens.
Oh yeah,
crickets.
And it's unnerving. It's just like, is the PA not on? And it's a different culture. It's a different city. They don't
totally
demonstrative, and so you have to respect them and be ready, in a sense, to alter course a little bit.
It's interesting because, like, I think you play in a bigger city where, and when I lived in Toronto, I noticed that there was more of a sense of self, like as a culture in the city. People were more like, not in a bad way, not in a good way, just was. And I've noticed this whenever I go to big cities, is that people are have more of an identity individually. Whereas when you're in smaller places, like, I don't know, and maybe I'm just totally making this up, but like when you're in Winnipeg, for example, like people there's a bit more of a, like, and I think maybe my point is, I think sometimes smaller communities have a bit of a sort of more of a group mentality, and bigger cities you have, just because there's so many people, and it's like, you just kind of have to be, you have to be more of an individual. So you go to shows and it's more common to have people hooting and hollering in bigger cities than it is in smaller cities. Like almost without fail, the smaller communities are always quieter.
Yeah.
The bigger cities are always more rambunctious. The smaller communities are a little, like, they are more engaged in the stories. The bigger cities, you have to work harder to get people to pay attention. To me, there are like these certain markers,
Yeah. And you start to know, like, now I know what kind of concert, if I'm going to go to Ottawa and play in that, in Central United Church, I know it. I kind of already know what I can do and get away
what
with.
kind of show you're going to have.
Yeah. And same if I go to Southern Manitoba, where people are less demonstrative. And so I remind myself ahead of time, you're not going to get a lot of hoots and hollers tonight, and people aren't going to laugh uproariously, but it's cultural and they are enjoying it.
Yeah.
So let them be who they are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a fun question, just taking things in another direction. Pardon me. Dave, this is from Anthony Kelly. Anthony says, Dave, you had talked about how Steve has also inspired your business. Can you share an example or two?
Sure. Yeah, big time. So you sort of hinted at it earlier, but you and Dave started this business called Signpost. Mm-hmm. And you guys are the original indies. You know, you took everything in stride. You guys four-wall all your own shows. You promote them. You bring all your production.
Can you talk about what four-walling a show means?
You guys don't use an agent. You book your own shows. Right. You promote your own shows. Mm-hmm.
You provide promotional material for your own shows.
Yeah, you even bring the PA. Yeah. So you guys run all of your own business. When we were first starting off, you guys laid the groundwork for that in front of us and just said, and again, you didn't do it in a preachy way. You just said, check this out. This is how we do it. Here's why we do it.
Yeah.
And that stuck with us in a really big way. And we went into the world with an indie mindset. We did things a little differently. We do have an agent. We have worked with labels in various scenarios, but we started our own music company out of that, inspired hugely by watching what you guys have done with Signpost. Mm-hmm. You guys distribute your own records. Mm-hmm. You print, manufacture, own all your own copyright. You do your own publishing. And so Birthday Cake, which is our music company, it's a publishing company, artist management company, and a record label, and talent booking. We also do talent booking. That was inspired entirely by Signpost because we wanted to run our own business. Mm-hmm. We wanted to be the ones making all the important decisions. And we wanted to be building up our own community. And so what you said earlier about your mentorship, this is a really nice way of kind of tying it all in. But you talked about your mentorship. One of the great benefits is that it allows you to be a part of something. And that really is a huge part of what it is to have started this company, is it allows us to connect with all these incredible artists in our community and be a part of what they're doing without taking ownership, without telling them what is right or wrong. It just allows us to come in and go, hey, we can help. Mm-hmm. We can help with what you're doing. We can support you in different ways, depending on what you need and what you want. Mm-hmm. So, what we're doing right now is just massively inspired by you guys creatively. Your sense of generosity and ethics and responsibility, your accountability, your advocacy work. We would not be the band we are. We would not be the guys that we are without you and Dave in our lives. We are so blessed to have you. It's so cool. Yeah. And we're so grateful.
Me too. I think what's really fun about this, and now we're watching your generation. Now now you guys are starting to get to be the older guys in the community, and there's a whole bunch coming underneath you. You're no longer the young punks, right?
Yeah.
But what from my side now is that this is not a zero-sum game. Your success just takes away none of mine. Your victories aren't my failures, and there's a way that once you start to realize that, and again, I'm going to come at it from my faith base, but that ontologically God is abundance. There's enough, right? And so it is no takeaway from me to pour into you. Do you know what I mean? And if you're really successful with that doesn't take away from, so there's a way, I think coming out of this last 4 years politically and stuff where there's, grubby hands trying to clutch their piece of property, whether it's intellectual or political or whatever and stuff. We don't need to do that. There's enough. There's enough joy. There's enough love. There's enough food. There's enough water.
There's enough money.
There's enough money. There is, so once you start living out of that ethic, that doesn't mean you never suffer. That doesn't mean I'm not saying that, but there tends to be a river of abundance that starts to flow around you, that other people can kind of come and take a dip in those waters and see that it's, it's true. And so, I think when Dave and I wanted to, invest in you guys a little bit back in the day, it wasn't just because we liked your music. I think it's because we both sensed that you got that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And that's I think more what we wanted to nurture than let us give you our advice about how to sell more records or something.
Yeah.
Or I don't think I've ever commented to you guys about how you should write songs or do your music.
No,
It's,
No, never.
No, it's more that we sensed in you that river that of abundance, and love and beauty that has flowed around us all these years. And so kind of go, oh, these are kin.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
them, they're us, right? And I think we felt that pretty deeply.
Oh
That's
man,
cool.
we are so eternally grateful for that,
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't say that enough. The things we've been able to do and the lives we've been able to lead, connections that we've made have really come back to some very key moments that I've shared with you, that we've shared with you, and
Mhm.
we really mean it. We would not be here without you guys. So this has
It's an
been
honor.
beautiful, Steve. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
being a part of this.
Thanks for letting me be part of it.
Yeah, man. I love you, David. I love you.
I love you too. I love you,
I
Steve.
love you
and
guys. Yeah.
and all the folks at home hanging out with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. Today is March 6th, 2021. This has been Karate in the Garage with the Brothers Landreth.
Oh, Steve's got something.
Joey, you may be having a very big week next week, so blessings in you and Anna, right?
Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Our due date is March 12th. So
We may or may not be here next week.
we may or may not be here next week. If we are, I'll see you then. If I'm not here,
I hope you're not.
I hope I'm not too. I can't wait to meet this kid, but send me good vibes. Lots of love to everybody. Stay safe out there. And thanks for joining. We'll see y'all again. Bye, Steve.
See you guys.
Top right.